Hey everybody, welcome back to Unlimited Commander. I'm Adam, and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Matt. Matt, how's it going?
It's going all right. I actually had a really funny thing happen just this morning that I wanted to share. I've got a friend on Twitter who I've known for a while. Really cool person and like a philanthropist, streamer type thing. They do a lot of charity causes, all this stuff, but they really don't like sort of like the what they call like the gatekeeping part of the community for Commander specifically. They are an arena player. They like playing alchemy. They enjoy a lot of the new vibrant constructed stuff, but they think that Commander players think that only Commander exists. Which, I mean, to be fair, it exists. It's not.
To be fair,
Yes, it is. It's not unheard of, right?
yeah.
I wanted to share this tweet that they did. And by the way, if you're out there and you like supporting people who do arena, if you like watching alchemy stuff, or you just want to see someone who does good work, at Turtlebox is who I'm checking out. Their Twitter is at the Turtlebox. Follow them. They're good people. Like sometimes they say some grumpy stuff, but this particular thing made me laugh. They said
Don't we all though?
They say 2 years ago, I made a shit post that got me viral on a ton of people's blacklists, and they used the term command splain. Today, they saw the term being used the way they intended it to describe gatekeeping. They saw it being used by people who said that they heard it originate from someone they know, and that the phrase was problematic and generalizing. And then goes and says, "Y'all, if one of my shit posts get yoink and gentrified one more time, I'm actually going to buy out Command Fest every year and invite all the homies from the synagogue and no one else. And we're going to watch A Tale of Two Kitties in the command zone, and I'm not inviting any of you. I literally have enough money to do this."
That's a lot of money.
It is a ton of. I don't know if that last part is true or not, but the idea of someone buying out every command and just watching Garfield and Tale of Two Kitties.
You gotta watch Garfield, and that's not happening.
You gotta watch Tale of Two Kitties more than once, which is
no. Like, I'm probably not going to end up like changing any of their posts or whatever, however they described it. It was a lot of words.
Yeah,
just so I don't have to watch Garfield movies at all. Like, I'd rather just not. I think that that's a threat enough for me.
You know what? It's not a bad threat. It is not. It's a very effective way.
It doesn't actually harm anyone if you do actually go through with your threat, right? Like, I guess we watch Garfield. Yeah. Like, it's not like anyone's overtly harmed. So as far as threats go, it's really like, do you want to watch this movie? No, don't do the thing. I guess
it's so funny. I love Turtlebox because they are genuinely upset with the way that the community fights amongst itself, which I also agree with. I think that overall, like, we're all Magic players, y'all, and on a grander base, we're all nerds. Like, we're all into something. Somebody's into something. If you play Commander and I play Constructed, or if you play Yu-Gi-Oh and I play Magic, we probably shouldn't have to fight about it.
That actually, okay, so that leads me into mine, because I didn't actually have a really good story until you said that, and actually now that you say that, I do. I went out for a drink with a couple of friends. Libby and I did, actually. And this friend of mine, not nerdy at all. He's very cultured, and he's a city planner by trade, actually trained in trade. And so I says, yeah, I stream on Twitch and I play video games, and people hang out. And he's like, I don't get it. Where is the entertainment in that? And I'm like, it is. You got, like, once you get into it, it'll make more sense. So we go out for drinks, and he says, I figured out my Twitch. I says, oh. He goes, competitive GeoGuessr, and he's a huge architecture nerd.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes, I get it. I watched GeoGuessr. And then we had this like real come together moment, because as he was going through describing how he knows about all these stupid little tidbits about architecture from around the world, and he is amazing at it. He crushes a GeoGuessr. He's like, oh, well, you see, in Romania at this point in time, they were doing this such thing, and he just goes into detail. And I stopped him mid. I was like, that is magic. And he was like, I get it. And then that was it. Now, like, when we're already good friends, but like watching him have his own nerddom and then me being able to apply, all of a sudden that's it. Like, we had common ground. It doesn't matter that these are two of like the least associated topics on the planet, really. Like, what are you going to get out of like Magic the Gathering and world architecture throughout history? And it's like, that's it. That's it. Now we know. And so now we grew our bond together. We're really good friends. Now we don't have to necessarily explain. I don't have to explain Magic to him to be able to be like, this is how I feel about this for these reasons. And he's like, okay, I get it. And so I got, without having to actually teach somebody Magic, I taught them my love of Magic.
See, and that's all it is. It's a mark of passion. I think we've talked about this on the show before, but I'll say it as many times as it needs to be said. Nerddom in its core is about passion, and the problem, the toxicity that comes from it is only because you are passionate about it and you think that your passion is exclusionary. If you can get rid of that bit of it, then you can just share your nerddom with everybody and nobody cares anymore. Remember 15 years ago or 20 years ago when being into Marvel was like a weird thing? Like, you like comic books? Like,
yeah,
what are you 13?
All my favorite things are splattered all over the silver screen, and everybody is now thinks they know more about it than I do. And I'm like, hey, cool, I guess. I mean, I'm happy you're happy, and we're here together now. But now you know how I felt all these years.
Exactly. But you owe me an apology for the rude, for the rude part, not for the other part. I don't care about the other part, but for being rude, you should apologize.
Yeah. So that's funny. We're all one big happy family.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell them what we're doing today.
Oh, I am very excited about today, actually. I don't know that struggle isn't the word, but like in between this like lull spot, we did a lot of like instructional videos for like the start of the podcast. And then, we're looking at talking about new cards and how we're excited for them and stuff. And we're kind of at a weird spot where like we've got a set coming out in a couple of weeks, but we have, a set that is honestly as good as some of the cards were. The set itself isn't all that exciting. And this next one is proving, in my opinion, to be something to be excited about. So we're in this like weird lull spot, and we were talking about what we want to do for the next couple of shows until this next set drops, because there's a lot of exciting things to talk about. And we come into how we don't have a cube as a limited commander podcast. We don't actually have a cube. I have a cube, and I am very happy with my cube and very passionate, but we do not have one. And Matt, you don't have a cube at all.
That's right.
So, Matt, we're going to build you a cube today. Whether or not we get all the way through it, I don't know for sure. But the whole idea is that we're going to run through everything that we talked about in our previous episode of So You Want to Build a Cube. And we're going to put this to the test, and we're going to start building an unlimited commander cube. And we're going to take all of Matt's hopes and dreams and the rubric we have already written for ourselves and everybody else, and we're going to put this all to the test, and we're going to make ourselves a cube. I'm excited. Are you excited?
I'm really excited. So what's funny about it is that I don't usually have an interest in this. Like, as far as building a cube goes, I love playing people's cubes, but I'm not usually like super jazzed when I start thinking about having to build a cube. But when we started talking about this morning, I'm just like, man, I'm already thinking about ideas of things that I want to do. So it looks like I'm going to be building a cube, which I've had people tell me for years I should build a cube of something. So if this is going to be a very funny endeavor because something that I had been uh, definitely, I would almost say, harassed about 10 years ago. I'm finally doing today. We're going to make happen. So
We're gonna start this process. I don't know anything about it. I'm gonna ask the questions. That's because we worded most of the things in the form of questions when we wrote which turns out to have been the best thing we possibly could have done, honestly.
mm-hmm.
And now I'm just gonna start with interviewing you, Matt, and we're gonna take these answers you give, and we're gonna start constructing you a cube.
Sounds like a plan.
This is where I'm going to cut because I drank my coffee again while we were talking through stuff, and now I need another cup of coffee. No worries. But that was a good time to cut. So one second.
Everybody, while Adam's away from the computer, he's probably not going to keep this into the show, but if he forgets to check it and it ends up in there, make sure to put good things about Adam in the comments.
So, first and foremost, and aside from the cop-out answer of because we have a podcast about it, what makes you want to build a cube?
You know, so I was thinking about this, and what got me excited about it. So Adam and I have had this conversation. I'm pretty sure it was off show, but we're going to talk about it a little bit here right now. I really like braids. Like I am known for liking commanders that in general will not be fun to play with. I do end up building outside of that realm, but like all of my favorite commanders are like these things that are very easy to highly abuse. All you have to do is play the cards that already exist in that theme and you're good. And Braids is a perfect example of that. So the new Braids, for those out there, it'll be up on the screen, obviously, but the new Braids is much fairer than older Braids things. So the idea is that everybody sacks permanents. You sack something, and then your opponent has a choice to either sacrifice something that shares a card type with it, or they lose 2 life and you draw a card. I believe this. Yeah, I believe that's the setup of it. So the new Braids is where I think that edict effects, the kind of things that make people sacrifice their stuff, should be. Because at the end of the day, they can just say, no, I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm not going to get rid of that land or whatever. I'm instead going to give you a little bit of card advantage and get things going. Now, the main way to win with Braids in normal Commander would be building something that multiplies on edict effects. So you put in things like Grave Pack, where whenever you sacrifice a creature, your opponent sacrifice a creature. That way, when you sack a creature with Braids, the edict goes off and everybody sacrifices a creature, and then they have to sacrifice a creature again. You end up drawing a ton of cards. You wait until you've amassed a ton of mana, and then you play something like Torment of Hailfire. That's the general win condition of something like Braids. But in regular Commander, there's no good way to play Braids that isn't that. Right? Like you can't get away with skimping out on edict effects or anything like that because everybody is playing good stuff. You know, your opponents are playing things that make 13 tokens a turn or whatever. So you can't just not play these really good cards. But it also means that if you get a foothold, they're not shaking you because you're going to keep them oppressed through the whole thing. So the idea I had for the cube is to make a cube that allows me to play cards like Braids or other things that I like in that vein that are fair on their own, but tend to be overpowered in a pure Commander situation, constructed Commander situation, and put in cards that make it so that people can play them, they can enjoy them in a controlled environment where they can't break them.
So, I guess, and we had discussed this about my own cube, and I like where you're going. So you want something that you can play scary cards, but you can control how scary they can get. Much how we discussed how Rune in my deck, Rune of the Hidden Realm, or my cube,
Mm-hmm.
Rune of the Hidden Realm in my cube is a scary commander. But when you take a look at what's accessible to you in the remainder of the cube, it's actually not that bad.
100%. That's
Okay.
the exact idea. We're going to take commanders that I like, the scary ones, and put them into an environment where it's going to be way harder to break them. Like,
Okay. That's a great answer, actually, and something that I'm looking forward to helping you through, because that is a great way to do the thing that you want to do. And because I can only see all the other ones, like we said, we just named two of them that people typically see as being horrible things to see, and then it's not so bad when you look around at the remainder of the cube. I can see there being like a little bit of balance issue of like, and something that we'll keep an eye on because we've talked about it at length, but just making sure that like we do find that nice balance point so that like the cube still remains fun. And if you do happen to draft Braids, you don't just run away with it. And I imagine that like other cards in it. Also, that answers another question that I was going to ask. So it sounds like you would like to build a commander cube.
Yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and build a commander cube, not only because we are at heart a Commander Unlimited podcast, but because this is a format that we are showing people that isn't like, commander cubes are not super like well known. Like, this is not something that a lot of people have and have done, you know, like overall the exploration of it is much smaller than like, you know, a set cube or just cubes that are constructed draft formats that people liked, you know.
So I can only think of a couple, and that's including my own. It's like mine, and then like Mental Misplay. Alan has one that people have said is very good. And aside from and the other one is, I think that Dan Sheehan is current. Like he tweeted about how he's built one, but hasn't released the video on his channel yet about it. So like, out of all of the entire Twitter sphere and just the general content creation grouping, 3.
Yeah, 3
off the top, of
our heads. Yep.
And I'm not saying that they don't exist in other spaces. I'm sure lots of people have put it on, and it's a whole option to checkbox on the website that we're going to be using. Cube Cobra is where I store my cube, as well as where we're going to be building this one. And it's an option that you can check off to like denote to people who are searching for cubes, this is a commander cube. And I haven't searched for any other ones because I don't like getting onto stuff like that, like EDH rec and like looking at other people's cubes, because then it
will
moves
color
my decisions.
how you
Yeah. It colors how I think about things, and so I don't tend to go searching. So I haven't looked, but I know that it exists, but not in the proliferation that you would see, as you said, vintage cubes or any of these other cubes that people have built that are designed to be in a tournament format as opposed to a multiplayer format. So that is a very important question already answered, and I have a little sketch pad that oh man, the lighting is really bad, you can't see it. A sketch pad that I'm writing stuff on to kind of help us figure it out. So what do you know how many people you'd like?
So that is a good question, because like I think it's usually, I would say that I think it's wise for us to do 4, because getting people together for a 8-person draft is hard, and it's one of those things that you don't really get to do super often, right? You have to work at it to get people out for an 8-person queue. However, I think that with the goal being to use these bigger commanders, I think you have to go 8-person, because the idea is that the equalizer will come in the drafting itself. So since we use Braids as an example, it's not that we're not going to use any edict effects, but we will keep them lower to a minimum so that she still gets to do what she does. She just can't do it and run away with things. But if you take that same card pool and put it down to 4 people, then you're putting yourself in danger of over access to whatever it is that color does.
So I will say, in my personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
I only really play mine with 4 people,
It's true.
but I still built it for 8. Some of which to cover what you had discussed, so that like not one archetype ends up being like too much, but
Mm-hmm.
also because then you can still like flesh out several more archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
Gives you a little bit more variety. Otherwise, you got to kind of like limit the color groupings that you go with or something like that. But there's ways around it. Like one way that I handle dealing with 4 players as opposed to 8, specifically when we're doing it in person.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been pondering doing it like when we do it with like remotely on spell table with Mox Field deck building and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that, or whatever we do. But uh, I do it in the way that I will make all the packs. So if we're 4 people, I will make it so that we still have 8 people worth of packs, but each person gets 6 instead of 3. And then once you reach halfway through each pack, you just burn it.
Okay.
You just toss it. So it simulates having those other cards being picked by other players. Now we tried it with bots. Didn't go great. I
Mm-hmm.
did look last time we had drafted it with bots and saw that the bots picked stupidly. They just like
They
picked
did.
colors, and yeah, it was
It
awful.
was
So
bad. We ended up what everybody had red
red
in their
green.
deck. Red
There were like
green.
3 Jund and like 1 teamer or something like
Yeah.
that. Like, or so it was everybody
Yeah. It
was
was
red
like
green.
yeah, like 2 Jun, a Naya, and a teamer or something like
No,
that.
that's what it was.
Because
Yeah.
yeah.
So like that just means that like almost all the Orzhov stuff, I think the Orzhov was picked aggressively and the blue was picked aggressively by the bots with no rhyme or reason. So if you can avoid using the bots, then it's better. And I think that like it worked really good in person when we did it that way.
Mm-hmm.
4 people and then just burn whatever's left of each pack. And that way
Mm-hmm.
you know that every card at least got seen. Because the thing that makes these the most fun is card quantity, so that
Mm-hmm.
you can have better selection. And I found this even early on in my testing with like the number of cards that went into each pack. Because I had actually initially started with like 4 packs of 15, just to kind of keep the more cards you see, the better you can build the deck and the more fun everybody has. And then from there, I ended up reworking it down to being 3 packs of 18.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you do 6 packs of 18, but you only pick 9 cards from each one, you get the same number of cards, but now you're still viewing it. So that's a bit of a tangent, but just to like, I guess,
No,
put your mind at ease, I
I
hope.
think that's good. Yeah, no, it's good to know that we can shift what we need to rules wise to fit that we're building for 8. And then like, I'd love to have this set up in a way where if we do all end up getting to go to a command fest or whatever, it's like we
Uh-huh.
get we get Light, we get Lily, we get the whole crew together
Yep.
and just try to have a good old time playing what are going to be super good commanders in maybe not super good ways.
Yep. That's why I built a cube. So I think with that in mind, we should shoot for 8. You're right. Like I can see where you're coming from, but I think from that perspective, we can shoot for 8. We can weasel around how many cards we finally get to. As we said, I don't like mine has a number that's just short of what's required, but I give extra cards to every player.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, like we won't finalize the last number, but
Mm-hmm.
that just gives us like something to shoot for. So knowing that we're going to shoot for 400 ish is probably like where I would recommend, and then we can tweak it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, this is yours / R-Cube, and we get to
Mm-hmm.
do whatever we want.
I've come up with an interesting idea for dealing with the color problems that we might have. I don't want to play a lot of like legendaries that are just 2 color, because when you start getting into these like themes of stronger cards, 2 color commanders put you in a very weird place where it's like, well, I want to play Braids, but I feel like if I, grab Elisol Core or something, I should run that as my commander, and then I could just throw Braids in the deck and blah blah blah. Like your brain tries to filter out the idea of playing what you want to play in favor of trying to play something that you think could feasibly win. So my thought was commanders legendaries will stick in either one color or three colors, right?
Okay.
And then outside of the cube, we will have backgrounds. And if you run a monocolored commander, you're allowed to pick one of the backgrounds that we have selected on the side to make sure that you can play a two-color deck. And just essentially treat every monocolor commander as if they have choose a background on them.
Okay. And then, so we're going to keep with one color and three color legendaries.
Mm-hmm.
And then supplement with backgrounds we choose on the outs. We haven't gotten to that point, and we can definitely revisit it. But my suggestion would be to make them the less cool ones.
Yes, absolutely.
Incentivize so that people don't take like an all-star monocolor commander and an all-star background, and then just like slap them together.
Yeah. On that note, I think that we also make the rule that it's like you can't use a background that's the same color as your command. You can't just go, "Oh, I'm going to play braids with a black background." Yeah.
If you do manage to draft monocolor in the unlikely shot, you don't get to just double down on your color. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. We'll keep that in mind. I'm not going to scribble that down because that's a pretty good rule that we're going to end up coming to. So now we can start getting into a little bit of some nitty gritty. So how would you personally, to figure out your archetypes? Now, I asked this so leadingly because you said you only want 1 and 3 color commanders. So that takes out any of the 2 color commanders, but I imagine you're still going to want likely 2 color archetypes, as most draft sets do, and then not focus on the monocolored? Or do you want monocolored to be like a strong presence?
So I think the smartest way to go about it for me would be, I like the idea of starting in 1 color archetypes and then building 2 colors by connecting the archetypes that end up in the monocolor groupings. So for example, if since we've been using braids as black, if I were to use some kind of white commander that is major into token generation, then putting a white-black creature in like, what's it called? Death Celebrant or something like that. Whenever a creature dies, drain your opponents a life or something. It's basically Ilusil Core, except it's not legendary. That would mean that we took the multi-token generating idea of white. We take the mono black sacrifice situation, and then our white black ends up being aristocrats because of the way that we built our white and we built our black.
Okay. So that's a pretty good one. Is that what you would like to go with as far as like Orzhov goes?
I think that that's probably a good idea. I think I haven't gotten a chance to look at white commanders specifically yet, white legendaries that I want to go into, but I don't see that being a bad choice as far as things go, right?
So like I wouldn't worry too hard at the moment, like looking down and just like working your way down through it, unless you have, like you said, you pick braids, and this is one of the things that we stated about like starting to gather your cards and figure out your archetypes and stuff is pick your favorites. And I don't think it really matters what you come out with the white legendaries, because you've picked out a black legendary that you really like. So like really it's almost more important, I guess maybe we even overstepped a little bit, and I should ask, like, what are some of your favorite cards you would like to see in here? Because then from there we can start picking at, like, see where we can connect some dots on the archetypes and stuff once you have identified a few things that you want in there. Because it's your cube, you get to put whatever you want in there. What do you want?
Absolutely. So one of the reason why we ended up getting into this conversation in the first place actually stemmed while we were looking for cards talking about your cube, and we came across Zur as a potential for maybe putting in your cube. And originally we were talking about new Zur.
Zur Eternal Schemer.
Eternal Schemer, yeah.
Which, since we're on it, is white, blue, black for a 1/4 flying human wizard with enchantment creatures you control have death touch, lifelink, and hexproof. And then 1 and a white, target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature in addition to its other types and has base power and base toughness, each equal to its mana value. And then we come up with how maybe the old Zur was a better option, which is Zur the Enchanter, which is 1 white, blue, black for a 1/4 flying human wizard. And it says whenever it attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with mana value 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that when we came to those moments, I was like, you know what? I really like both of these cards. And they both are similar in vein, right? They both want to do enchantment stuff, but one is dedicated to low level enchantments. Zur the Enchanter wants you to get mana value 3 or less, so you want to have a big stock of 3 or less. The Eternal Schemer wants you to have more expensive enchantments in your deck because they want you to be able to take a 5 cost enchantment and turn it into a 5/5 with Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof, right? So that you can get something out of its ability. It's not as good if you're only running 3s or lowers. And I love both of these cards. So either one of these could be a card that I could consider for the deck or for the cube as far as things go. I'm leaning personally more toward Eternal Schemer, because I think that Eternal Schemer is a very cool card that needs finesse of draft in order to successfully use. And in a draft environment, it's a lot easier for you to pick up a couple of 1 or 2 cost enchantments and a couple of 4 or 5 cost enchantments than it would be to construct a deck that entirely use that effect and not just decide that you want to go Zur instead. You want to go Enchanter instead.
Yeah, and sometimes you're going to find that you have a couple that work really well. Like one could go into the other's deck as you're putting your cube together, or you're going to find that they are going to conflict at the chorus level. Like my Esper commanders that I currently run in my cube, as we said, were a Layla. What is Provocateur? I forget the rest of her epic. Anyway, Artful Provocateur. I have Keza, the uncommon from New Capenna, that whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life, and Bane. And none of those things really operate inside of each other's decks at all. However, if I change one of them to Zur the Enchanter, as we were discussing, then a Layla and Zur could work together. And so I kind of like when you could do either. I like having like a healthy sprinkle around. If you were to take a look at, say, my Selesnya commanders that I have, I have Kadira, Caller of the Small, who cares about doing combat damage and making 1/1 rabbit. I have Maya Bredegard Protector, which has landfall, make a 1/1 human. And then I have Trelasara Moon Dancer, which cares about putting 1/1s on Trelasara so you can scry. Oh, whenever you gain life. Sorry, it's a life gain one.
Yeah.
So 2 of those kind of go into a theme together. You could almost pick either or if you were to go into Selesnya tokens, if you manage to draft them both. Or you could end up with Trelasara and then shift entirely to like a Selesnya life gain build and then a little bit of a go tall. So like, and you could technically put Trelasara in one of the other ones if you wanted to, but like they don't go super together. But the other 2 could play together, or it also gives the option to like, I want this one more because combat damage to make tokens versus landfall to make tokens. So creates a little bit more of a dynamic environment if you do pick a couple that similarly behave and could interact together. And then also when they don't do anything similar at all.
I think that that's really good. My personal like situation with this is that I think that especially amongst 3-color commanders, I think it should be a real reward for you if you're going into the 3-color and you manage to draft 2 legendaries that are both in that same triad,
Mhm.
like it only makes sense that they should work together so that you can benefit from that situation. You also would run into the issue, as you would inevitably in normal draft, that if I, on the opposite side of the table from you, or you directly to my left, both end up picking up the Esper commanders, that we're now in a bidding war for
Mhm.
who gets to play the better Esper deck,
Mhm.
which is the way it should be in draft. If people are forcing into a color situation, then they should be punished in some way for
Yeah.
not doing it. And what better punishment than giving a good reward, right?
Mhm. So I like it. And any other favorite cards that you
Uh,
would like to
you know,
see in your own cube?
I'm definitely so. Everyone out there might realize at this point that I've got a little bit of a brain that kind of goes everywhere. So yes, but also ones that are not like directly coming to mind in this moment.
Okay.
I know what I'll be avoiding. So I mentioned that
Sure.
I like monocolor stuff. I will be avoiding the Praetors. I will be avoiding the Praetors from every set, probably including March of the Machines. Because I think we've seen almost all of the Praetors
I
from
think
March of the
as of
Machine.
recording, like even Urbra, the last
Yeah,
saga
Urbras
flip
just
one
got them.
it was spoiled this morning. So
Yeah,
yeah, we've seen them all.
yeah. So the original Praetors, the asymmetry of them makes them a lot less fun.
Mhm.
I usually don't care about the symmetrical or the part of it that's boosting. It's usually the part that's messing up the opponent. It just sucks the fun out of the room for a lot of people who are playing. The second ones have the same problem, and then the third ones they seem okay. Like from what I've seen of them in a vacuum, it doesn't look like they're going to be overly broken because at least these ones don't have asymmetrical effects.
Mhm.
But the idea of them being able to flip back and forth from being a creature to an enchantment might make it hard for people to actually get them off of the board. So
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting kind of like, do you have the proper removal when it's the proper face for what you're trying to deal with? Like if you're,
exactly.
oh, let's just throw it out there. Like, so say you're playing mono black and then it's an enchantment for a while and you're like, well, that sucks. I guess I'll deal with it in 3 turns.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Assuming you don't die in those 3 turns because of
Right.
whatever it does in
I
on
didn't
its
draw my
backside.
feed the swarm, so I guess this just sucks for me.
Yeah. So
So,
exactly. I think that so I'm going to avoid the Praetors entirely, and I'm going to lay probably going to lay off of uh 3-color commanders that are just like good no matter what. Like
mm,
we've talked in the past about how Eminence commanders are messed up. Like it looks like the new one is pretty. They learned their lesson, but the original Eminence commanders are too wild. There's like I'm not gonna throw Edgar Markov in here. Like
yeah. And like your Chulanes and your Corvolds and stuff like that. The stuff that's just like pure value.
yeah, exactly.
Understood.
There's no point in doing super pure value unless there's a choice aspect to it. Like that's why I like braids is that
Hmm.
it has that choice element, right?
Hmm. So I think the only like galaxy brain question that I have left in starting this process with you is, do you have any specific themes you would like to see in there? Like I, for example, have talked about how I put the coin flip deck into my cube because I don't want to build it in real life seas, but I still like seeing it built. Um, so this isn't something more like, you have already mentioned aristocrats in general, which I know that you love.
Mm-hmm.
But like something that you maybe don't want to build routinely, but you would like to see built and can cram some of your favorites out of that into your cube.
Yeah, actually, I think that I like I always like the idea behind like red blue spell casting. Like spells matter, instants and sorceries in the graveyard, all that kind of stuff. And I never build it. And I don't build it because I don't like the way it generally goes down, because it either ends up being super combo-y or not working. Like, because if you only get to cast 1 or 2 spells a turn, it usually doesn't end up pulling its weight.
Mhm.
And if you end up playing, like it's like, oh, I'm gonna use Kaikar and create an infinite loop where I'm recasting the same thing over and over again or whatever to make it so that I have infinite birds. So it just doesn't have the staying power that I like in a constructed value, or it's just solitaire. So I think I want to work on that. So I just mentioned Kaikar, and I think Kaikar will be the example of that.
Kaikar Wind's Fury. 1 blue, red, white for a 3/3 flying bird wizard. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying and sacrifice a spirit, add 1 red.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking I will attempt to make red some kind of spells matter color. And then Kaikar will be the tricolor card that works in tangent with that situation. Okay. So
I like it. Okay.
It's also good because we've already decided white is sort of our tokens matters color. So feeding red and white together, you get into Kaikar's situation.
That leaves blue with a little bit of space too, because what are you going to do with blue to feed into Kaikar, which is something that we can figure out as we start picking some stuff apart. So we've got a couple of our monocolored archetypes kind of fleshed out a little bit, or at least something to identify them. We got white with tokens, black with edict or sacrifice effects, and red with spells. So as we're going to start fleshing out some of these multicolors, do you want to try and pick a multicolor one and then see how you'd like it to tie into the one we've already chosen? Or would you like to finish fleshing out the monocolored and then start drawing some lines together? Like, as you said, Temur is going to end up being your, not Temur, Jeskai. So Jeskai is going to be your spell slinger.
Okay. So thinking in those terms, right? If blue ends up being, I guess you don't want blue to just end up being flyers, do you? Because you end up in that weird space where it's like, oh, just make sure you draft the blue because the blue has flyers in it. It's got a solid enough flyers that if you can go mono blue.
I think that what we're going to find works best, and we've talked about it in other things, is like how you mentioned, for example, the color pie where blue is the color of card draw ended up being a bad thing. I think if you make any of these be one really good thing too much, like as you said, and that flyers in blue being the flying color, that's probably going to end up biting you long term. So if you go with something a little bit more broad, as opposed to just like this piece of value, like for example, I would avoid green being the pure ramp spell or the ramp color.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
for sure.
Right. I found that, and I made a specific point of removing most of the ramp from my cube. It has very light on ramp in the draft itself because I added in the packs to try and compensate for that, because I didn't want everybody just drafting green out of my cube, because in Commander, everybody idolizes ramps so much. So avoiding things that are like, this color is really good at X, don't do those things.
Right, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really good way to think about it. So the first thing that I thought about was, I was thinking in red blue, and I'm like, let's look at another tricolor commander that I love a lot, that I don't get to play a lot because it ends up being too good for normal Calamax, right?
Oh, I love Calamax.
So let me.
I never get to play my Calamax deck. Calamax the Stormsire is 1 green blue red for a 4/4 elemental dinosaur. And whenever you cast your first instant spell each turn, if Calamax the Stormsire is tapped, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. And then whenever you copy an instant spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Calamax.
Okay. So since we've already decided red is a spells matter color, Calamax is a good choice for a 3-color thing to beef around. Green almost always has +1/+1 counters involved anyway. So if we make green's thing either modified or +1/+1 counters, we'll be in a solid place for Calamax to fit as a 3-color commander, but still have a solid build for where green is going to go. I also think that would put me into a place where I'd feel good about putting in something like Kodama the West Tree as the mono green commander for people to go ahead and try to run. Kodama the West Tree for people is a 3/3 with reach that has modified creatures you control get trample, and whenever a modified creature you control deals damage, you may search your deck for a forest, put it into play tapped, and shuffle your library.
So I like that a lot in general. So that's a great mono white. What I would say then is, and this is where we start drawing lines together and putting things that we like in conjunction. So if you're going to go with 1/1 counters and modified as like the mono green and even then if you wanted modified specifically, you've made like Esper to be your enchantress, but that means that those 3 colors will likely end up with a good number of enchantments. If you were to start looking at some of the other color combos and how well they could go with green, maybe like Esper is the one where like Zur the Eternal Schemer is the big enchantments, but now you're going to probably end up with a lot of enchantment support otherwise.
So for little enchantments, do we go with something like, oh, what is the Bant Enchantress commander called?
Estrid.
That's the
no, that's the Planeswalker one.
Tuvasa. Am I smart? Am I a genius? Yes, I am. Yeah, Tuvasa the Sunlit, green, white, blue, for a Merfolk Shaman 1/1. Tuvasa the Sunlit gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control, and whenever you cast your first enchantment spell each turn, draw a card. So this one doesn't have the blowout power of other Enchantress cards that is like, let's just chain enchanters and draw, and chain enchantments and draw, and chain enchantments and draw. But it does fit what we've been doing with green fine, because it gives you ways to play around with modified. It gives you something to do with the white creatures we have, because if you are playing a bunch of white creatures, we could play Anthems, and those would fit in well with Tuvasa. And so all we're doing right now is trying to kind of figure out what blue, we're working backwards and finding out what blue means based on the things that we have allowed for blue in terms of this. Maybe blue focuses in on its control aspect, since there's a lot of things in there, and then you can do like bounce spells, tap enchantments, things like that.
So I like where you're going with it. I can see like it's the only thing is that I would recommend is not, again, one of those things where it's like if something every deck will benefit from, then like spreading it out. So like when and this is just from me, and take it as you will, but like when I'm thinking of like the control aspects, I think of, and I group them, even if you look at all of my commander decks on Architect, a counter spell holds a same slot as a murder spell, which holds the same slot as a disenchant. It is removal. So if you make one color's thing, and this is the same thing as like making a draw in my mind, is if you make it a removal color, then you're going to have people focusing on it because they're like, well, the only removal I'm seeing is in blue.
Yeah, no, definitely you don't want it to be the only like control color. It's more of the question of what mono blue fits in in the same way that we've talked about the other monocolor things with the extended 3 colors that we're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What portion of that goes in? And I knew blue was going to be a struggle because blue is like one of my least played colors. If
Mm-hmm.
you look across the board at what I play, you'll note that blue tends to be missing.
So I guess what we can do then is we can take a look, and as you said, we were already kind of doing it anyway. Let's work backwards a little bit and by looking forward. This is
Mm-hmm.
work with me here. Just
Yeah.
follow along. So for example, something we could do is we could look at Sultai, because Sultai has green and black, which we've identified as modified, and edict
Mm-hmm.
is green and blue or green and black respectively, and then
Mm-hmm.
blue has to factor in there, so you could see where you want Sultai to go using the 2 you've already
Okay.
identified. Likewise, Grixis we've identified black and red, so we can look at some of these if there's like a commander you like in there, and we can see if we can find like the touch point between them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's see. Let's look at Sultai then. Like my first pull is something like Muldrotha.
Mm-hmm.
Muldrotha, just for the people out there, is a 3 black, blue, green, 6/6 elemental avatar. During each of your turns, you may play a land and cast a permanent spell of each permanent type from your graveyard. If a card has multiple permanent types, you choose which one you are playing it as. So, Muldrotha is a very strong commander. It's the kind of thing that you actually don't see in Commander super often, probably because of its strength, because it's so easy to just kind of get in a loop where you're Muldrothing everything, right? It's a lot of advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in a draft format, it will probably be hindered by you wouldn't want to go too thin with it in case your opponent has removal for your Muldrotha even one time, because once your Muldrotha has been removed, it's a lot harder to cast at 8 than it is at 6,
Mm-hmm.
and even harder at 10 than it was at 8. So, and then your deck would be weirdly spread out between because you run a bunch of different permanent types in order to try to get the most out of Muldrotha's effect. So I see it being more like you'll be able to get back things if you are going with the black sacrifice routes, or you'll be able to pull back creatures that can give a +1/+1 counter to give things modified.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, your Pride Malkins and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So I like all of that. And even if you don't go right with Muldrotha, I actually run Mimeoplasm for many of the same reasons.
Love Mimeoplasm. Oh, I love Mimeoplasm. And Mimeoplasm fits modified right off of the bat and benefits from sacrifice effects. Mimeoplasm is so good.
And like, so as we're picking like one-offs right now, we're going to end up finding more, because as we were just looking at this before the show, but I run no less than 2 of any given color combination for legendaries, just to make sure there's enough around. As we were also talking about like Zur the Enchanter, which one would you run? Maybe you run both. So like if you like either of those, you could end up running both in the end anyway. But I like that. And here's where that conversation led me to go with blue, is not quite mill, but maybe something like Surveil.
Okay.
Right. So like, and any of the stuff that works in there. So Surveil works really good when you're playing with flashback. Surveil works really good. So if you use that as like the self mill color,
mm-hmm.
And then start looking at stuff. So that also would play into like your spells archetypes, because then if you do flashback for some of them, like if you mill out your flashback stuff, some of it is going to end up like, if your Faithless Looting is probably going to end up in this cube somewhere anyway, so then it starts playing in with that. So like any of the stuff that cares about playing out of your graveyard or putting into your graveyard, I think would work really well. If you're looking at either your Bant or Esper ones, like you were talking about doing Enchantress in one way or another, that would end up putting stuff in that you could then get back out, or any sort of manipulation. Like if you do it with like your Surveil, then you're also technically scrying. right? So then you know what's coming up next and stuff like that. Tuvasa would really benefit from something like that because then you can get the junk out of the way, well, so that you can like top deck yourself another enchantment with Tuvasa to like draw that card when you play your next enchantment this turn. I think that would do pretty well. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I think that there's some good ideas there, and then it would make it so that you could run a lot of the blue black connive type stuff, which would put you still in the general range of what you want to do. And then if you go with like something like Muldrotha or Mimeoplasm on that side, you're combining modified with the recursion that happens from the sack effects, or in this
Mm-hmm.
case, the surveil / discard effects
Mm-hmm.
from the connive. So,
And then and we know this in general, and we talk about it at length about like cards straddling archetypes and like modular card, not modular cards. That's its own thing. Whatever cards that do multiple things.
yeah,
It's gonna be good in the long run.
You got the right modal cards.
Modal, that's the one.
Yeah.
So like modal cards are going to come in really nicely in all of this because you're going to use them to straddle over things. So because you're not going to necessarily have everybody go right into your version of Sultai when they're drafting.
Mm-hmm.
They might end up with Mimeoplasm at the head, but then they go with the stuff that supports the other archetypes that are in those colors and like combine into their own thing. But if your card selection is going to end up touching a couple different things, then it'll end up still working and creating a fun environment for everybody that's playing. So I think that's what we're going to do for now. Again, this is not set in concrete, not set in stone. We get to change this as we're going through as much as we want, but I'm going to write down self-mill. So now we can start looking through and seeing how we can apply some of these. As we said, Sultai will then end up being like Graveyard Love. Abzan, we have selected tokens, sacrifice, and modified for Abzan. Do you have anybody in there in your mind that could sacrifice, like touch on all those?
Tokens and modified. Not off the top of my head, but this is what the internet is for.
I do love the internet. One that pops out right away to me is actually Gave. Gave, Guru of Spores, 2 white, black, green for a 0/0 fungus shaman. And when it enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it, immediately making it modified. 1 and remove a +1 counter from a creature you control. Make a 1/1 green Saproling creature token, which puts us in the token range.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1 and sacrifice a creature. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature.
I think that's great. Gave is a really good choice to fit and link within our current ideas. So,
and again, like we might end up having to flesh out a little bit more later or reach out, but like as far as like an example goes, I don't even know what to call this archetype, but I'm just going to write Gave again. it writes itself.
Well, and that's the beauty of what we're doing, right? Is since we started at monocolor, the archetypes that follow the 3 colors are fitting within our 3 monocolor major archetypes, just exemplified. And so if you want to spread yourself thin on things to do in a particular color, you can always go the 3 color commander and maybe have to fight with the table for all the good stuff in each color, maybe not. Or you can pick a color and risk just kind of making yourself a really good monocolor deck or 2 color deck because you use one of the backgrounds, right?
Next up, I was looking at Mardu, and I see a little bit of a hiccup because we have identified Mardu would then be something to the effect of spells matter, sacrifice, and tokens.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle to find something that straddles all of those. I can find some that straddle a couple of them. For example, Jan Jansen cares more about artifacts specifically being the tokens, but Jan Jansen sacrifices creatures to make treasures and sacrifices non-creature artifacts to make creatures. Mm-hmm. So we get the white tokens a little bit, we get the black sacrifice a little bit. We're a little bit light on spells in that one, but we do end up in a couple of them.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know how far you're going to end up wanting to take your artifact quantity.
I think we want to be careful about going too far into artifacts since this would be the only color that would game from it. But what you could do if you are in this color setup and we were to use something like Jane Jansen, then it would still go well with some of the spells matter cards because the first thing I think of when I think of spells matter is prowess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this would be a way of making it so that it's like, yeah, I'm using my artifacts. I'm casting my artifacts, and those are going to pump my prowess creatures for the time being, and we'll get into what we need to get into and try to get there. So that's not the worst choice as far as this color triplet goes.
Couple other things that pop out to me. Queen Marchesa.
Mm-hmm.
Putting Monarch in your game is always a good time,
Mm-hmm.
and Queen Marchesa makes a token if you start your turn and you're not the Monarch. I don't know that that's going to be like the end all, but like I'm just trying to see what touches on stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't think that that's a bad idea though. Like Queen Marchesa fits in the idea that one, like you said, getting Monarch into the game is always worthwhile, and uh, she creates tokens that can be sacrificed, right? If you need them for abilities and whatnot. She would touch less on the spells matter situation of
Mm-hmm.
right.
I think that there's not really a
You're never
Mardu
gonna, yeah,
commander
you're not
that's
gonna
going
hit
to
a
touch some spells.
solid, yeah.
Okay, I have a weird idea. Hear me
Uh
out.
huh.
Gen Arcanum Weaver. Gen
I
Arcanum Weaver, red, white, black for a 2/3 human wizard, and it has an ability red, white, black, and tap, sacrifice an enchantment, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
mm-hmm.
Your uh, white is already going to end up being decently in enchantments
Mm-hmm.
because it's in Esper and Bant, which you have identified as two different Enchantress ones.
Yeah.
And then the black is also in the Esper one.
Yeah.
So there's a couple there. Like this is probably going to flavor your whole cube into enchantments.
I don't think that that's bad though.
Mm-mm. I agree. Uh, if you take a look at any set that Wizards even releases, is like your typical draft set, there's usually something that runs through almost all colors. Like as an example, most recently, like the most recent Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, enchantments ran through the entire thing in all colors. There was a lot of enchantment creatures, a lot of enchantments that just mattered. Sagas were still really heavy in that set. So it's sometimes okay to have like an undertone through your entire cube because then it's easier to support throughout all of your archetypes. One that I do in my own cube that I didn't even realize for a good long while, but dragons.
Yeah.
I accidentally had an undertone in my entire cube of dragons just because like I had started making some changes to it around the time that Battle for Baldur's Gate came out, and it was already just a lot of decent dragons. I already had Sylvia Brightspear, Corvath Brightflame as one of the partner pairs, so dragons mattered there. And then I just accidentally kept slotting in things that cared about dragons. What is it? Hello, you. Goodbye. As I said, Rith, the liberated primeval from Dominator United, I really like the card in general. I slotted it in because I like the card, and then it also happened to be dragons. So it's okay to have like a subtle undertone throughout the entire cube because it does make it easier for you to build it. And you can change this down the line if you find ways to modify it, but I don't think that that's a terrible idea.
Yeah. I was thinking about that myself because I do like I really like enchanting creatures and things like that, like Theros and that whole spiel on enchantment
Mm-hmm.
creatures was so cool to me. So I was already thinking in those veins anyway. So I think that that would be a very useful way of setting up a good recursion system for that color grouping, which may like And that's another thing that is important to remember is that unlike WotC, who gets to create new cards to fit whatever it is that they're trying to do, we as cube makers are working within the set number of cards that there are in the game as it stands, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that those restrictions keep you from making a perfect set. Don't beat yourself up if a color triplet just doesn't work quite as well as you'd want it to. You know,
Mm-hmm.
do your best, but don't give yourself too much grief about it.
So, where does that leave us here? We
Well,
still have we still have some 3-color ones that we can identify. We haven't really touched on any of the 2-color, but honestly, I find 2-color to be the hardest and easiest because then you just take a couple of the things from each one that you've identified in your 3-color and
mhm.
you
Yeah,
just
I
pick
think
something.
it'll be pretty easy to. It'll either be really easy or really not easy to link certain two
Hmm.
color things. But let's look at what we've done so far, just as an overarching thing, because we definitely want to do our take here before the end. So
Hmm.
we'll at least go over what we've done so far. So far we've developed the main archetypes for our monocolors. Going around in WUBERG order as we do. Tokens matter, surveil, and self mill. Black is sacrifice things. Red is spells matter, and the green is modified / +1/+1 counters, whatever. And then have we hit all 10 color links yet?
Not quite. We're 3 short. We could probably like plow through them really quick because they're probably the easier ones.
Let's go for it.
So the next one that we need to figure out is Grixis, black, red, blue. Just I think if we just pick commanders for these, because honestly,
Yeah, I think that's the best place to start. It really is.
because otherwise, like they're pretty cleanly identified as far as the archetypes. So we're looking at something
Yeah.
that does self mill, spells matter, and sacrifice.
First thing that comes to mind on Hello the
Yeah, I was
Painter.
just looking at that.
1/3 Death Touch. The first instant or sorcery you cast each turn has Casualty 2. Casualty 2 means if you sacrifice a creature with 2 or more power, you get to copy the spell. You can choose new targets
Done.
with the copy. There it is. Sacrifice,
Casu-
spells matter, graveyard.
the nice part about picking casualty is that it was very well fleshed out in a set, and you could, aside from making some of your own choices, you could very simply pull in all of like start with just all of the what was that, maestros?
Yeah, the Maestro stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could just pull in all of the maestro flavored stuff from Capenna, pick and choose which ones you like, and then just like flesh out with stuff you like from other sets. Like that one, that's going to make that section of your deck real or your cube really easy to build out. Jund is next, or Riveteers, as the case may be.
It's funny you started mentioning the new Capenna names for things. And that's not wrong because when I think of my favorite things to do in a lot of these colors, it ends up being in the new Capenna stuff more than it ends up being in the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a conversation about this off camera about how much I love Strixhaven, and because of it's the things that the colors do that they don't normally do that I get into with Strixhaven.
Yeah, and I actually my favorite Jund deck is actually Zayatora. Zayatora the Incinerator I built as a treasure build, and I like that better than anything I've ever done in Jund.
Zayatora is really fun. You know what I really like and would fit with a couple of our things? Zera,
Hmm?
the Golden Sting.
So I was just looking at Zero the Golden Sting. 1 black, red, green for a 3/3 insect assassin with flying and haste. And whenever it attacks, put an egg counter on another target creature without an egg counter. When that creature dies, if it has an egg counter on it, draw a card and make a 1/1 black insect creature type when flying.
Yeah.
I think that that's a pretty good addition. It covers your own sack stuff because you would put the egg counter on your own stuff and then sacrifice it to get your token. And an egg counter modifies it.
Mm-hmm. Plays well with casualty uh, being something in the situation because you put an egg counter on your own thing, sack it for value. It's pretty good.
I don't know what to call that archetype, so I'll leave it blank, but I will put in Zira as our commander for that one. And finally, we have Naya. You got a couple different options to go if you want to focus on the tokens. Naya loves tokens. Girad Conclave Exile, Atla Palani, and Ginny Fey, Jetmir, Kit Kanto. And in like multiple different sets, there's been quite a bit of love for tokens in Naya.
I think Garrett is a really good example of the things that we'd want to do anyway, because even with red being a spells matter color in red usually means damage spells or pump spells anyway. So pump spells along with something like Girard create good value for you as an attacker, because it's like, yeah, I'm populating a token.
And red spells might end up being what you end up fleshing out your board with anyway, because red spells love putting out like goblins. Molten Rebirth is one I run, also because it's a coin flip card, but that's neither here nor there. But like Molten Rebirth is like 3 mana, make 2 1/1s. But I like it a lot. So I don't know. We'll just populate is the
big
mechanic I'm going to write down for now.
Big tokens, something like that. Yeah.
When I think of populate, I think of big tokens anyway. And this is just me. This is an anecdote, because as a massive token generating deck, I found populate isn't that great because I don't really want to do another 1/1. So I think we've made like some serious headway today.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of these questions that we've asked you today are some of the hardest ones to do, because you're conceptualizing something that is at the moment kind of ambiguous. And even then, once you have all of these cards laid out and you'd like spread them out on the floor, or you put them into one of these online cube builders or deck builders or what have you, like it's still kind of hard to conceptualize because it's so vast. And these are the things that I found, at least when I was doing mine, that I was just cramming stuff in and then like running through, and I'm like, why did I pick this? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit any of my stuff. So now that you've identified how it is that you kind of want this to play, now you can start fleshing out some of the cards to fill out each thing. And also, what we didn't do today, and we can save for next time, is then taking these 3-color and monocolor archetypes that you've decided you like, and picking which ones you want the 2 colors to support, because this is where like the glue is going to end up being. You're going to have a lot of like monocolored stuff, and as you say, like there's potentially a chance that you're going to end up doing a monocolored deck, but it'll likely be a 2-color deck if you decide to take one of the backgrounds that you're going to choose and set aside. And then these 2-color cards are what's going to like bring all this stuff together. And so we can pick and choose that later on too.
Yeah, I think that we've got such good headway on where things are going to start. And like we told everybody at the beginning of this, when this is all said and done and is something functional and ready, it will be up, and we'll make sure to put it in the show notes of whatever episode we get to that puts us there. But continuing from here, I feel like at least we've got a solid foundation going where we can really start hitting out some nitty gritty. Although the nitty gritty is going to be really interesting when we're like looking up cards.
Yeah, I don't know how in depth we're going to go on some of that stuff. Like fleshing out 400-ish cards in a podcast maybe isn't a grand idea. But
we found
picking up
10.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, and like what
15.
we've done so far is great, right? And it took us an hour. Wow. Now, to be fair, we were also asking you like your wish list for a cube. So like a lot of this wasn't just identifying specific cards that you want in it and like how to flesh out each archetype, but what it was doing was giving you like the framework and like the intrinsic value that this is going to generate for you, and trying to identify what is going to bring you the most joy.
Yeah.
And we've managed to do that today.
Absolutely. And like we said when we first did the cube thing, it's not built in a day. It's not something that you just hammer out in one sitting. Take some thought, take the time, and in the end, it'll be worth it.
but it's achievable, and I think that that's something that I'm happy that we were able to show today. Like, we took, and I recognize that perhaps like our combined knowledge of Magic in general aided us in this in some way, because we didn't have to like search through the entirety of Scryfall to figure this out. We knew what we were looking for, how to like make Scryfall give me the stuff I wanted to like review really quick.
Sure.
But nonetheless, like, this is all achievable, right? We sat down, we asked Matt the questions. Matt gave us the answers that we were looking for, and then we identified some things. And from here, we now know where we can take it, where we want to start looking as far as what cards we're going to add in, what other commanders we're going to add in, because one commander for each color grouping is probably not going to cut it. Yeah, it's probably not enough, but
we'll get there.
We'll get there, right? And it's just it's a thing that you take a little piece at a time. How do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time,
right? So we took our first bite today, and it was a pretty big bite. As someone who's gone through this process without me to give the experience to, and we managed to get in roughly an hour a really good basis, and somewhere that we're going to be able to take this and hopefully generate some interesting content for everybody while we build a cube live and in person.
Absolutely. Okay, should we end on the right take? Do we want to do that today?
The right take.
That's what I've decided to call this segment. Welcome to the right take, where our take is right. And
yeah, hit me.
This is going to be another one that we picked up from Twitter. Another one of those hot debated topics over the last few weeks that we decided that we're going to go ahead and bring to the forefront. And this one's another oldie and a goodie that keeps ebbing and flowing depending on the time of year it is and who said what. But recently, somebody has restated that they believe that Chromatic Lantern is not a good card. Chromatic Lantern is a 3-cost artifact that says that all of your lands gain tap for any color, and it itself taps for any color. So recently, it got back into the Twitter sphere that people are debating on whether or not Chromatic Lantern is a good card. Is it viable in Commander? Is it not viable in Commander? Is it something that you even want to run in a cube or anything like that? And so I figured we'd go ahead and share our opinions on that particular fight. So what do you think? Gut feeling.
Chromatic Lantern is a great card. I think that anybody that thinks that any 3-mana rock is unplayable is too sweaty for my play group anyway. And like honestly, like, I recognize that 2-mana rocks are strictly better. If you can run a 2-mana rock, it gets you there quicker. You're dropping it on turn 2 instead of turn 3, or in, some Commander games, turn 1 instead of turn 0, or whatever you have, right? But like, if you're dropping it a turn late and that mattered to you, were you really there to play with your friends? I loop this in with like all 3-mana rocks. Some of them are not great, I will admit. I will not run a Manalith, right? It lacks any upside. But like 3-mana rock, this cat is out of hand today, gang. Out of hand. Anyway, like any 3-mana rock that you run that you feel isn't good enough, you need to evaluate what you want out of your deck and out of your games. I run Chromatic Lantern in 4-ish decks, I think, to this day, ignoring all debate that anybody has. And anytime anybody's ever said, oh, it's bad, I run it in Jodah, which is a 5-color deck, and I need to be able to cast Jodah, and I need all of my colors. And like, I don't know, Matt, do you like Dryad of the Elysian Growth?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? A 3-mana critter that says the same text as Chromatic Lantern. Sure, you get to play an extra land per turn, but I will tell you that actually doesn't really tend to matter much. And it's targetable by 2 or 3 different types of removal, not just destroy target artifact. It's an enchantment creature, so it's targetable by murder, it's targetable by disenchant, it's targetable by any number of like board wipes that care about enchantment removal or creature removal. Like and as a point in one of the games we played in with my cube, is there was one of the archetypes we discussed, archetype of courage. No, can't remember. The one with trample. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Somebody had the archetype that takes away my trample and gives all their creatures trample. And I took it out with a Dispeller's Capsule.
Yeah.
It was an enchantment. I was like, oh my god, big brain moment, galaxy brain stuff. And I saw that I had an enchantment removal, and I was like, oh my god, I can get that thing. So you're willing to run that thing that does the same text, doesn't ramp you, by the way, right? Like, sure, you get to play an extra land per turn with your Dryad, but once you're out of lands in your hand, that doesn't do anything for you. But that Chromatic Lantern still taps for a mana every turn. And again, any 3 mana rock with an upside is worth considering for me. I don't anymore. I did actually run the Darksteel Ingot for a while.
Yeah,
it's just an indestructible, right?
Yeah, just an indestructible tap for any color, right?
But I recognize, I guess the ultimate thing is that they're also the same people who are going to argue that any 3 mana rock isn't worth running. And we're not the first ones to this party to like tell them that they're silly. I know that Commander Cookout podcast, it's a running gag on their show. Strongly recommend you check them out. Anyway, they're local to me, actually, physically speaking. They're also from my city.
Cool.
And their content is very casual, and they love pooping on people who poop on 3 mana rocks.
It's so funny. So I sit pretty close to the same idea. Like, by the way, anybody who's out there waiting in the comments to say it, we know that Dryad of the Elysian Grove says that they become any land type as well, so that it also works well for like domain and whatever. Functionally, it does the same thing. It makes mana tap for any color. The thing that makes Chromatic Lantern the funny example to me in terms of what this is like, I can totally understand where people are coming from if they're talking about 3 mana rocks that do not do what Chromatic Lantern does. Like, I could see someone making the argument against Darksteel Ingot maybe, because it's like, okay, well, yeah, you can tap it for one of any color, but you know, like that at that point, hopefully you've used Soul Ring, or you've ramped into something that's already in your colors, so it tapping for one of any color isn't really a big deal or whatever. The thing about Chromatic Lantern that really makes this argument moot is not only that it gives your stuff, or it taps itself for any color, but it makes all of your lands tap for any color. Without ramping, it completely fixes any color problems that you were having up to that point. You didn't have double black, you have it now. You didn't have triple green, you do now. It automatically fixes everything in mana. So as long as it stays out, you are in a position where you can cast every card in your hand. That is very different than, I don't know, like Command Sphere, right? Like where it's still 3 mana, it still taps for one in any color, but you're not sitting on it. Like, if you want to make the argument that 3 mana rocks, quote unquote, are bad, I think you're still wrong. But like, I can see someone making that argument. But Chromatic Lantern is so much more than just a mana rock, like a 3-cost mana rock. It does so much more for the decks that you put it in. And like you said, you're in Jodah, or you're in any 4 or 5 color commander deck. What are you hoping to accomplish without the ability to fix?
This is an argument from somebody, like not mine, not what I'm about to say. I'm saying that like the Chromatic Lantern sucks argument. This is an argument from somebody, and I'm just a blanket statement, and somebody can like flame me later, but I'm not pointing anyone out. But this person has not played a commander deck where the land base was less than $400 in 10 years, right? Like in this day and age, I guess we have the full set of triomes. You know, we have all 10. We have all 10 shock lands. If you're lucky, you still have a set of OG duels, right? Like these lands that tap for multiple things and either come in untapped or don't, or like whatever have you. But like they're fetchable. All these ones, like they have a full set of fetch lands, right? Like their mana base has not cost less than $400 in 10 years. So they don't know what the struggle is like to get stuck with the inability to play your cards, because they play all 10 shocks, they play all 10 or what I was just assuming 5 color.
Yeah.
Let's just say 5
Yeah,
color. 'Cause
we're
that's
just
where I play it
assuming
most.
5
4 and
color,
5,
right?
right? Like they have all 10 shocks, all 10 triomes, all 10 fetches, and perhaps all 10 OG duels.
Mm-hmm.
And now they have a $6,000 mana base in their 5 color deck. And they're like, why would I run Chromatic Lantern? Everything I have taps for my color. Yeah, I friggin' bet.
Yeah, sure.
Right? I just stated your land base, right? 36 lands, give or take, 36 to 38 lands in a commander deck. And there's 10 shocks, 10 duels, 10 shocks, 10 triomes, 10 fetches. And then, I don't know, flesh out your last 6 into something that maybe the crumbling necropolis and stuff like that, or whatever,
or even if you want to just push into OG duels, right? Like OG duels is a high cost solution to whatever your color problems are, right? But you're not wrong. The cheapest version of Chromatic Lantern's like $3.19 or something like that. Like that's an insane difference in quality of card versus cost. Because like I've talked about this before, and we can do this on another show, that OG duels are overrated. Like,
everybody says so now.
Yeah,
thank God.
I'm like, thank God that it's changed into that idea. But honestly, it's a land. A land is a land.
Sheldon Menery publicly announced that he cut all OG duels from all of his decks. That's where it got to, right? He's like, these are not necessary. Nobody needs $1,000 land, and I don't need them, so I have cut them. Like, Sheldon Menery's been playing for literally decades, and he's like, you know what? This is irrelevant. I don't need this. I am perfectly fine to. And I don't know what he slotted him in for, and he's probably still running shocks and fetches. Sure, we're all running shocks and fetches, right? Like, I was playing during all of the 2 most recent Ravnica sets, and I was pretty fresh after the original Ravnica set, so I have multiples of all of the shock lands, and a lot of people have been playing for 5 years. They cracked them at reasonable rates. They bought them at $10. They're up again, as they tend to. But Modern Horizons 2 just came out, tanked the value of all of the Zen fetches to very reasonable rates if you really need them. The most expensive one was Steam not Steam Vents, I forget now.
Yeah.
Whatever. Arid Mesa's like $10 or was $10 for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that like at the end of the day, it's like, if you have money and you can afford the good stuff and you want to play the good stuff, buy the good stuff. It's fine. Or if you want to proxy it. We don't care. You can still hang out in our pod and proxy the land base you need. We don't care about land base. But if you are in a group where like you have to play the cards that you have and you're doing whatever you can, Chromatic Lantern is a great solution to a lot of mana fixing problems. And to say that Chromatic Lantern isn't good just because I don't know, some 2 cost rocks are better for 2 color decks or 3 color decks, I think that maybe you missed the thread. You know what I mean?
Like, one that gets me that everybody is super high on. I'm also super high on it. I am not pooping on those people. I'm on their team. What I'm saying is that one that gets me is Cursed Mirror, which is 2 and a red. So it actually limits the decks you can play it in, because you costs red to play it, but 2 and a red for an artifact that taps for a red, and when it enters, it clones something for 1 turn. For 1 turn, you could punch somebody with something, I guess, maybe, or activate the ability of something that somebody else controls for 1 turn, and then for the rest of the game, it taps for a red. And that one, people love it. They love this card, and I agree in the sense that I also love it. Right? You love it. It's a great card. I've picked up multiples of this thing. I opened it in like the deck it came in, and then like when it was reprinted into the Mishra Precon, my LGS had some that were in like the old border. I was giddy like a schoolgirl. I picked up a handful of them, and they're great. And this, how is this better? For 1 turn, you get to do a thing, and then it taps for 1 color, does nothing else.
Exactly.
But Chromatic Lantern eternally fixes you. You no longer care. Do I have my colors in a color heavy deck? Like I play Atraxa. I play Joda.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple other ones that are like three color but color intensive that I have slotted it into. Like I
Mm-hmm.
still run Chromatic Lantern.
Yeah,
How is Chromatic Lantern worse than Curse Mirror?
exactly. It's
I'm looking for the answer.
it's absolutely it's not, and that's the thing is that like I think you're not wrong though. Like the main purveyors of the opinion that Chromatic Lantern is bad is going to be people who can afford better solutions, but also remember that you have to play with other people. And
Mm-hmm.
there is a certain point where it's like, it's weird sometimes going up against people who are running OG duels, despite the fact that I've just stated that it's not that great of a card. I had
Mm-hmm.
someone play a Volcanic Island the other day, though, while I was sitting at the table with them. And I was just like, they're like, what, you have a problem with OG duels? I'm like, no, I just don't know why you spent the hundreds that you needed to spend to get that. Like, I don't understand why you did that. Chromatic Lantern exists, you know?
Yeah, and like maybe they had it because like a lot of the
Oh,
people
sure.
we see with OG duels that play, like they've had them for
Yeah.
eons, right? Like they were a thing, and people who were back like, and you hear stories all the time. People like Dana Roach who tell stories about how they picked up all of these OG duels for like a handful of bucks a piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
$4 or $5 a piece. Back in the day when nobody realized what land bases were going to do to deck values,
Yep.
and how could they possibly have known?
Couldn't.
But like but like and if you own them and you play them, sure. I guess I don't immediately assume somebody bought them. I assume people had them because we've been around long enough playing this game that like I've got crap that I have no business owning that I did not pay its full price
Oh,
for.
for sure.
Right? Like I've got an unlimited, I think unlimited I think it's unlimited. An unlimited Wheel of Fortune, which for a hot second was $2,000
Mm-hmm.
at the like when the pandemic hit and everybody in the States got their bonus or whatever I can't remember what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Canada. But anyway, everybody ended up with their $1,200 and somebody spent their $1,200 on buying up all of the Wheel of Fortunes. And now my Wheel of Fortune sits at like $400. I traded for that thing when it was like $10.
Exactly. Yeah. I got the
My whole desk out of anger. You know, and you run through my decks. I've got like an unlimited Sylvan Library, same deal, $2. I cracked my foil parallel lives out of a booster in OG Innistrad. That thing's apparently $100 now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And all that said, like if you're trying to play, if you're just trying to play 4 color or 5 color or even 3 color or 2 color, and you need to have your mana fixed, Chromatic Lantern's real easy to get a hold of, and it's real cheap, and it does what you need it to do. So you're welcome, Twitter, for solving this again,
fixing your problems,
fixing your problems once again. If you're out there complaining about Chromatic Lantern, stop. If you're out there defending it, you don't have to anymore because we just told them.
Send them our way. I'll handle it.
Yeah,
I will handle it. Yeah, it's like $7 Canadian now for your average Chromatic Lantern,
mm-hmm.
which is fine. And you can get one in a fancy old board. Matter of fact, the alternate art old border one from Brothers War is the same price as the regular art old border one.
Mm-hmm.
You're not even paying a premium for the fancy art anymore. And like the
Warhammer
Guilds of
40K
Ravnica
one
like,
isn't that much more. And if you bought any of the 40K decks, it's in there. So congrats, you know. Like
the only expensive one is the serialized one at $500. And that's because every one of those serialized foil artifacts was like through the roof because there was only 500 of each.
Yeah.
But like the secret layer one is 20 Canadian dollars. That is the expensive one you can reach. Or if you want to get the Kaladesh Inventions one is 150 Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
You can go ham on this, or you could spend the $4 to $6. And this is just me looking at one store. Mm-hmm. I haven't looked everywhere else yet to find any others, but it exists. It's inexpensive by comparison. It fixes your mana. And if you're playing at a table where they're going to beef on you because it is too bad and it's a 3-mana rock that does nothing, leave that table and come to our table because we will welcome you with open arms because we just like having fun with our friends and drinking beer and eating tapas.
Hell yeah.
Brought it back. Gang, Thank you so much for coming to hang out while we started Matt's Cube and had a right take as per usual. You can catch more right takes and more cube building next time on Unlimited Commander. Have a great time. If you liked what we had to say, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support goes directly to growing and improving the show.
You can also like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Make sure to comment or leave a review. The cast can also be found on Twitter at Unlimited Commander.
You can find Matt's Twitch, Twitter, and other YouTube projects at knowledgepoolmtg.com.
And Adam can be found on Twitch and Twitter at Adamus_Prime86.
Our theme song is Polaroid by Harris Heller, licensed by Creative Commons.